Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Filming Stories. Hope you guys been enjoying the content channel as of late. Excuse me, I have just been trying to record this like 3 or 4 times today, and it's just each take. There's always something happening in the house. Um, or in my case, my phone also was running out of storage. So we're going with the camera this time around, and yeah, so we're here to talk about a short that me and my good friend Sebastian put out. It was entitled I dot dot dot, and I just wanted to give a little recap, just a little background, where things came from, the uh, how it was conceived, and all that stuff. It was very similar to carousels in terms of how the process came about. Um, and with carousels, the interesting thing about carousels that makes it distinct from this was that carousels was actually um, there was a lot of footage that was utilized from those many years ago, and I explained a lot of just kind of the development of of what the original pitch was, because before it was meant to be something a lot more personal, a lot more self-reflective, and then it became exploitative very, very quickly, and that's when I decided to drop it completely. And then I always had these lingering feelings about always returning to that project, but I never knew how to attack it. And then how carousels came to be was very similar to how this came along, but different reasonings behind it. In the case of carousels, um, it was the result of a kind of a low point that was happening, and I needed some kind of outlet, so I was just kind of writing stuff out because I used to journal things quite a bit, especially on my phone. I would just pull up like a little Google Doc sheet, and I would just start typing things out, and and I did that when I was in with what would become carousels, and and a very similar thing that happened here, but there was a different approach to it. It wasn't purely from a place of vulnerability. It wasn't just because of an emotional state. It was actually a lot to do with like recent events that I think kind of triggered it as well. A lot of these shootings that have been happening recently, just it for some reason it got me really, really deep. Especially this most recent shooting with Charlie Kirk, which is it's just tragic. What happened, and it's tragic every time when it happens. But for some reason that particularly got to me, and I sat with it for a couple of days, and I legitimately had gotten like depressed because of it, because I I saw the response online, and just the evil that was being put out there, by so many people, and I don't know if it was because of Squarely, just that, and because of just personal things that were also going on in my life currently, to be honest. Um, because of that combination, it motivated me to write out stuff again, and the reason why something like what happened to Charlie Kirk, the reason why it affected me so much was because I finally sat with that. Um, I finally sat with the impact of those events, because events like those happen so often that you might become numb to it, you might become desensitized to it, and unfortunately, it does happen so frequently that it almost is like a regular day occurrence at this point. Like every time I pop up the news, there's always something like that that's happening somewhere, and it's really, really, really tragic that it happens so frequently. Um, but with this, I sat with it for like a couple of days, and I really was just really depressed, knowing how evil people, like, it really showed me for the first time how evil people can truly be, and that kind of um that kind of life that does exist out there in the world, you know. Um, but with that, and also personal things that were that were going on at the time and currently still, I felt motivated to write, um, and I started writing, you know, and I started just writing a lot about, like, I don't know the point of when I decided to write it out, but eventually I got to a place where I was starting to really consider, you know, what is it about people and how they act, you know, and where does that stem from? And, you know, I don't know if it's because of just sitting with what I was sitting with, or if it was because of personal reflections. I don't know. But at some point, I decided to started writing out again, very similar to what I did with carousels, and um, and I started writing, and I started writing, and I kept on writing, and I did contextualize it like I did with carousels, with the idea that maybe this is a story or maybe it isn't, and eventually I arrived to a place where I you know, I like, because also a lot of the times when I was writing, I was, but with carousels and with this, a lot of it's just kind of just like trying to make sense of it. Like, does this make sense, or does this just more of a ramble? You know, am I finding something that is unique? You know, because when I'm writing, I also feel like I'm discovering at the same time in some regard, and that's what was kind of happening here, was just kind of letting things kind of move in a natural way and discovering things, um, more more realistically, but also examining it, you know, in a more profound way. You know, not just all surface level. And I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. That's not what I'm trying to say here. All I'm saying is that, um, you know, it's looking at things more rudimentary. You know, not just looking at it just on a specific surface. You know, um, and that's when I arrived to the dialogue that you hear in the film, um, and you know, moving from that, that's when I decided to just to look through some of the old footage and see what I can use, and that also was a natural thing. You know, that wasn't like carousels where, because carousels, like I said, there was additional photography that was required, and sorry, the lighting is all over the place. My apologies. Um, you know, it wasn't the case of carousels where it was like, oh, um, you know, I have this footage that we made specifically for this film, so so we have to use the other footage that we had used 2 years ago and use it around that footage, work around that footage. There was no barrier with this, you know. So when it came to just collecting that footage, it was just more like, okay, this would be neat. Okay, this would be neat. Okay, this would be neat, and you know, putting it in the editing bay, and then just what stuck, you know, and I just pieced it together as it came along. Like, okay, we'll use that shot. Okay, we'll use that shot. Okay, bam, 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 and it just came as it is, you know. So it was a very natural occurrence. You know, it wasn't, you know, something kind of similar to what we were talking about in the film about natural occurrences and, you know, what is real and what isn't, you know, how you deem what is real, the societal term of what is real versus what is natural. Um, you know, that's, you know, that's how it all kind of came about. It was just a very natural occurrence. You know, it wasn't something that was specifically designed, you know, or at least in the footage department, it wasn't designed with the intention for this film. It was just, all right, here's the random bits of footage that we have, and let's just see what fits, you know, and if it makes sense, can it be contextualized in that way? Can you basically manipulate that footage and make it resonate and make it seem plausible within the setting? And at least to me, it fit. And you know, just to say also, I completely recognize and admit that, you know, the film is not perfect. You know, there are things about it that even upon watching it, you know, I sat, watched it once, and just to make sure everything kind of worked the way I wanted it to. Look, I know, like, there's audio that probably is not clean. You know, I also know that there's things within that audio, you know, that probably could have been tinkered a little bit better. Maybe some of the visualizations, or maybe not. the strongest, Um, but I think that it was more of a challenge to utilize what you have versus obtaining more, because when obtaining more, I also am allowing myself to make it bigger than it actually should be, you know. Um, so I didn't want to mess with that, I didn't want to deliver more than I needed to. So and I'm not trying to cover for the film. Obviously, you feel the way you feel about it. If you don't like it at all, I would love to hear that. I'd love to hear your perspective of it, whether you disagree with the messaging or you just don't like how it is made. I want to hear about it. I'm not against those conversations in any capacity. Um, so so that's essentially how it all came to be. It was a very similar process to carousels, but the key difference is that carousels had footage in there that was made with the intention for that movie. With this, all the footage that you see in the film was not made for this movie. It was just made for a very, very, excuse me, for a very different idea many, many years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago. That's now being used here for a very different purpose. So, so, and originally, the when I was and it was in the editing bay actually up until the last moment of the raw cut that I made. Originally, I was going to title it "To Be, comma Through Me," which is a reference to the last line in the film, the last line in the story. The question of, if to be is through me, what am I choosing not to see? Um, the It just felt a little on the nose to me, but the great thing about the title was that was another um, variation of the previous story that me and Sebastian were trying to tell. At one point it was called A Cat's Carousel, like I said in the video about that I did in discussion of carousels. Um, but at one point for a long time it was going to be strictly called I, and I always was looking for something that reflected the idea of identification, about definitions, and in the case of this is a lot of what the film is looking to discuss, and further, I think, more than just those surface ideas, kind of discussing the definitions of definitions, like, and, what does it mean to have identifications, and morality, all these things, the way that we twist language to our will because of our necessity to understand things, that sort of ideas were kind of embedded into older variations of the specific project me and him worked on. So when I got done with the raw cut, I had my Google Drive was right next to me on my tab, and I just saw the title there, and it just made sense. It just made sense for the title to exist. And I looked at the old title and I thought, no, that doesn't really work anymore. It seems a little too on the nose. And then we arrive now with a really odd predicament where, two different titlings for what was essentially for the same project are now being used for two very different kinds of projects. So, yeah. So, and they have their similarities, carousels and they definitely have their similarities. Definitely by design, they have similarities. And by some mechanics, by how they choose to tell their stories, they also deliver it in similar ways. So yeah. So yeah, that's that was the whole endeavor behind this. It was also a fast turnaround. With carousels, it was about a week because we went to get the footage and then I had to edit it all out. With this, it was squarely to do with editing, so it literally took me about, I think, 3 days, about 3 or 4 days to complete it entirely. So it was a lot faster turnaround. So, and more of a willingness to do it as well because of the fact that the footage was there. If the footage wasn't there, I don't know if I would have even tried because, I have my view on filmmaking right now, and it's very specific. Sorry, because My mom's told me before me saying that word, I'd say it wrong. But it's very, very specific, if I'm saying it correctly. I have to be in. It just has to hit at the right moment, at the right time, and if it makes sense, then go for it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But the whole needing to go above and beyond, like creating this and that, getting a crew together. I just don't know if I'm into doing that right now. So it's kind of the lazy boy films that I'm doing here. With Sebastian, of course, who did such a wonderful job behind the camera. I mean, some of the shots that he got from both of these projects, I think, is just amazing. And a great guy and a great, friend. I consider him a third brother at this point. So it was very interesting experiences. They were very odd processes that took place to get these shorts off the ground. But I wouldn't have it either way. I mean, it was a unique experience, and I'm glad to share it with a good friend of mine in Sebastian. So yeah, so those are that's pretty much the experience in a nutshell. It was just kind of quick, and we are where we are now with the film out there. So that's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed some of that little insight. And again, if you have your thoughts about the project, I would love to hear them, whether it be negatively or positively. I mean, I'm not saying you have to like it, just, however you feel about it. I wouldn't mind hearing about it. I wouldn't mind any interesting discussions if you guys have any. If you guys disagree with the messaging of the film, I mean, that I invite conversation, as much as the film, I hope, is inviting a conversation. I welcome that as well. So, but let me know. I'm trying to think how. I don't want to come across as egotistical at all. Saying, let me know how you feel about this. No, but check it out if you guys get a chance to, or if you guys don't want to, that's perfectly fine. And yeah, so that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.